last time, we dug into case 3 a bit more. We got through the second round of investigations, picked up some clues showing that there is a much bigger plot to this fake scientific experiment than we thought there was originally, to the point where even the police coroner seems to be in on it. And we just barely managed to make it to the point where now we're calling all these different witnesses and establishing what really happened in court, and it's looking like this is like the final part of case 3, but we were just warned that we're going to open Pandora's box with what we're establishing, which is quite ominous. So let's see what's happening next. Continue. Last we left off, we should be in the Old Bailey Defendant's Antechamber. Yeah. 24th of October, 11:53 a.m. The Old Bailey Defendant's Antechamber.
Ah, the knight errant himself! Oh, have you been watching from the gallery, Mr. Sholmes? I've been on the edge of my seat the entire time! Courtroom trials are fascinating affairs, as a spectator at least. I'm glad you've been enjoying yourself.
I have to ask. What on earth is going on? It makes no sense. What's this professor business all about? He doesn't look like any professor I've ever met before. Who even is he?
Of course. You were in Germany already 10 years ago. Yes, the professor. When I discovered he was the one who had been abducted, a sense of foreboding stirred within me. But who knew the monster would come knocking at your door? My heartfelt sympathies! Ah ha ha ha! As it turns out, Lord Van Zieks is even more intimately tied to this case than any of us realized, isn't he?
Yes, how true. His great friend from university in the dock.
And now a waxwork of the killer who took his esteemed brother's life makes an appearance too. I imagine even the shrewd Mr. Reaper failed to foresee that kick in the teeth. An extraordinary move on your part, my dear fellow, to throw that in front of the man. You make it sound deliberate.
I can't help feeling that this professor case is really very puzzling.
Oh yes, in what particular manner?
Well, there's Mr. Drebber, Dr. Scythe, and Lord Van Zieks. It seems that everybody in the trial has a link to the case somehow.
Yes, in fact, I alone am not a member of the set. Though that leaves me as an empty set, all alone with no intersection to any other.
Excuse me? Who's that?
Oh, hi.
Why are you in the defendant's antechamber? Also, still love your theme.
Dr. Scythe? Ah, Dr. Courtney Scythe, nay, Stevens. Good day to you. Hello, Sholmes. That was very shrewd of you. What in particular, pray? You requested that 10-year-old autopsy report from Gregson, didn't you? Why would you assume such a thing? Because Gregson told me. To think it's been 10 years. 10 years in the laboratory, wielding my scalpel. I smell of nothing but corpses and disinfectant. A policeman on the jury had a lot to say about you as it happens, Dr. Scythe, and I've accused you of being complicit in what happened. I'm hoping that you'll take the stand and tell the truth about what really happened. That certainly won't be possible. Lord Van Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. Lord Strongheart? The Pandora's box you're warned about is the Professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me.
But attempting to hide from the truth, that's cowardice!
I've always fought crime in the way that I see fit. I have no regrets, none at all. And that's all I came here to say. So, good day to you.
What a good theme.
She mentioned it too. This Pandora's box. Whatever does it all mean?
There's really no cause for concern, I assure you. When the trial resumes, the meaning will become all too apparent, whether you'd like it to or not.
Huh?
Now then, I believe it's almost time. I must make my way back to the public gallery. The edge of my seat awaits.
I think maybe you're enjoying yourself a little too much.
Ah, yes, one word of warning before I go. If, in the course of the trial this afternoon, you perceive even the shadow of doubt about the truth, don't let it out of your sight. Pursue it like a dog with a bone. To the bitter end, you understand. Do not falter, whatever may come to pass.
All right, I understand. Thank you.
Good. I shall make myself scarce then. I purchased a bar of caramel earlier, so I shall be gnawing on that as you gnaw away at the truth.
What did that warning from Mr. Sholmes really mean, I wonder? Especially the bit about whatever may come to pass.
Are we about to lose our badge again? No.
It's time for the final chapter then. I'm determined to find the truth, no matter what.
October 24th, 12:40 p.m. The Old Bailey courtroom.
In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby reconvene the proceedings of this court. Counsels for the defense and prosecution, are you ready and able to continue? The prosecution is ready, my lord.
Yes, my lord. The defense is also ready.
As the court is aware, the case under our scrutiny began with a damaging incident at the Great Exhibition. Yet we now find ourselves embroiled in the details of a convicted felon who was sent to the gallows a decade ago. This trial has certainly defied all expectation, as seems to be the fate of all trials in which this Nipponese is involved, my lord. So then, let us begin our explanation of the defense's assertion that the waxwork was cardinally involved in this matter. Lord Van Zieks, my lord, are we still awaiting the arrival of Madame Tispels? Not at all. She's in the antechamber as we speak and ready to be summoned. Very well. Bring in the witness. At once, my lord. Bailiff, show Madame Tispels to the stand.
Things are about to become a lot more intense. If Drebber's responsible, as I'm sure he is, it means he must have had an accomplice in Dr. Scythe.
And what connects the pair of them is the waxwork.
Yes, the model of the professor. That's the key to the link between these otherwise unrelated individuals. It's a tenuous link, admittedly, but at present it's all we have to go on.
There she is! Oh! She's making a permanent Sholmes.
State your name and occupation for the court, please.
Oh gosh, what was your voice again?
My name is Madame Esmeralda Tispels. I am a waxwork artisan, and the proprietress of Madame Tispels' Museum of Waxwork. You will have to pardon me for working as I testify. My new exhibit must open very soon.
Oh, so he finally gets a statue, does he? Now there are two of them in the world.
Oh my! What expression is she carving onto that face?
A number of days ago, a particular waxwork model was stolen from your museum. Can you confirm this?
Oui, that is true. What a little side eye. God, she's pretty.
At first, we believed it had been kidnapped.
A waxwork model kidnapped?
Yes, my lord.
There was a demand for ransom money left behind by the culprit. However, according to what I've just been told outside the courtroom, that was not the true reason. I understand it was utilized as a substitute for the body of a murder victim.
At present, that is no more than conjecture proposed by the defense. This is the victim of the case in question, Mr. Odiasman.
But of course, I know him well. He is a part of my odious personages exhibit. I detest to say what is evidence, but Mr. Asman does not resemble the professor at all.
Yes, but perhaps their faces are very similar.
Are you suggesting that we should see now the demasked visage of the professor? I have here the key, but it is strictly forbidden to open the lock.
That is absurd.
Pardon? Sorry, maybe it should be pardon?
I don't know what face you've carved onto your fancy figure beneath that mask, but clearly it won't be that of the actual killer.
Indeed, the man's identity was never made public after all.
The trial took place in a closed court. The proceedings were strictly confidential. The condemned man was summarily executed. His identity remains a closely guarded national secret. There is no possible way the repository of Tawdry exhibits could get its hands on that information.
Quoi dommage. It would seem you're unaware of the Tispel's principles.
What principles?
The family Tispels has always prided itself on sculpting its models à la perfection. Every detail, including the visage, is fashioned with complete fidelity. Et voila, our principles. There is a well-known legend about the Tispels waxwork from the time of the French Revolution. A member of the Tispels family is said to have made a waxwork of the queen who was executed. Oui, that is true. It was a century ago now. I believe the queen's face was carved in the minutes following her death, actually at the guillotine site. You are correct. The model is on display still today in the House of Horrors. We Tispels will stop at nothing to obtain a faithful replica of our subjects.
Dear me, a somewhat disturbing tenacity of purpose.
It is the only way to obtain a truly lifelike representation of the subject. And it has been my family's secrets for generations.
Do you mean to say that beneath that mask?
Oui, the true visage of the killer is there.
This is ludicrous. It's out of the question.
The professor spread terror throughout Great Britain. As a result, the Madame Tispel special exhibit remains extremely popular even today. The killer emerging from his own grave. It is a sight to behold. You should come.
I think, madame, it would be beneficial to hear your formal testimony on this matter. You will explain every detail of this macabre model and your personal involvement in its creation.
With pleasure. The Professor Waxwork. The special exhibit in the House of Horrors is based on a rumor that shocked society in London. An impression of the visage was taken directly from the corpse, in accordance with Tispel's family principles. I enlisted the aid of the gravedigger and created a mold for the head in the cemetery just before the interment. I hid myself until he gave me a signal. I was there for a very long time that night. As dawn approached, I was very worried that I could be discovered. Hello, welcome. We've got the pretty lady on the stand.
The gravedigger, the man sanctioned this.
Oui, I will do all that is necessary to achieve the true resemblance my family is celebrated for. Nobody else knew, only the gravedigger. What harm did it do, huh?
So you truly saw it. The face of that monster.
Naturally, I was aware at the time that his identity was a secret. But Tispels would not be Tispels if we did not insist on absolute fidelity to our sculptures.
I don't believe this.
I myself have seen a special exhibit at your museum, madame. A truly blood-curdling scene in which the murderer is emerging from his own grave. The scene it depicts was the subject of many rumors in London 10 years ago. I have here a newspaper from the time. Oh, goodness. Let's see. Rises from the grave, executed criminal returns the dead at night at local cemetery. Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. On the night of that foul demon's execution, the newly interred professor forced off his grave cover as he clawed free of the earth. The young man who witnessed the scene was on the verge of raising a shriek when in the next second a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the man's chest, whose breath stilled. Youth then finally released ran for his life. Interesting. Nobody mentioned the fucking gunshot before.
I think he really was buried alive. Oh my god. Okay. The special exhibit was based upon the picture in this article. It was the most detailed account of what happened as reported by the eyewitness who saw it. The newspaper article recounts the tale of the eyewitness to the alleged resurrection of the professor from his grave on the night of his execution.
Man rises from the grave. It's too absurd for words.
The public enjoy absurdity, monsieur. That is why I have reproduced the scene as carefully as possible in my museum.
And it's a waxwork from that exhibit that was stolen some days before the incident at the Great Exhibition, wasn't it?
That is correct. The professor you see before you here.
Most puzzling. Counsel for the defense, proceed with the cross-examination.
This waxwork links Drebber to Dr. Scythe, and there has to be some reason for that, which hasn't yet come to light. But I'll find it. I'll get to the bottom of what really happened. I'll prove that Dr. Scythe and Mr. Drebber were in on this crime together.
Alright, before anything else, let's take a look at this new article. The university student, the bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more. The youth then finally released the scream he had been holding and ran for his life. Yep. Oh, this happened when Mr. Drebber was still a student, huh? Perhaps shortly before or shortly after he won that trophy then. Okay, Mad Sheep Rampage. Charles Darwin to receive Copley Medal. The Great Stink. And let's see, was the ball mouse to blame for the Great Blaze? Okay, nothing else. Yeah. Nothing else seems quite important here. And press.
And that rumor would be...
A 10-year-old tale now, but one that no Londoner would ever forget.
Right, I know just what you're talking about, I think.
Of course, it couldn't be anything else.
Yes, that story will never disappear.
The tale of the condemned killer rising from the dead. That is the central attraction of my house of horrors. The rumor was whispered all over the city, and it was like this. It was in Lowgate Cemetery behind the prison, in the dead of night after the execution of the killer. The interred professor slid back the stone slab covering his tomb and emerged from his grave. A young man who witnessed this felt a scream welling up inside him. But an instant later, he heard an ear-splitting gunshot from over his shoulder. The bullet struck the emerging corpse, and he fell motionless once more. The scream finally found its way from the mouth of the young witness, who turned and ran for his life.
The corpse climbed out of his own grave.
And then somebody shot him. Who? Who was it? Nobody knows, even today. But remember, it was just a rumor. Perhaps nothing more than a ghost story. The good people of London, they love stories like this. That is why it was in every newspaper across the capital.
But was it just a story? I mean, this is exactly the scene that can be seen today at your museum, isn't it?
Oui. The special exhibit was modeled on the very illustration. For a while afterwards, the contents of the article were reproduced in every newspaper imaginable. Madame, might I say something? Please, go ahead, mademoiselle. When something is described as rumor, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely made up. I believe that often rumors contain elements of the truth. Ah, I see that people from the East can be just as astute as the people of Europe. Can we be sure, for instance, that the professor's execution was successful? It is not possible for the dead to come back to life.
Sorry?
10 years ago, I was there in Lowgate Cemetery, after the criminal known as the professor was killed by hanging. I took a wax impression of his visage from the corpse just before it was interred. So I can assure you, the man was dead.
I see. It would certainly appear that the condemned man suffered the intended fate. I don't believe it. I think he was buried alive. Dr. Scythe is hiding something.
Hold it!
Is that true of every waxwork in your museum, then?
It is, assuming the subject is dead, of course. Live subjects have to cooperate in a similar way. I have letters from imprisoned criminals all the time, you know.
What sort of letters?
When my time comes, please make a waxwork of me. How do I say that? Comme ça? What is French?
No.
My museum is famous, monsieur. To be made into a waxwork is an honor, and for some criminals, a symbol of status even.
Because nothing says hardened criminal better than wax?
And it is thanks to one killer in particular that my museum has gained such popularity in London. I refer to the star of the special exhibit, of course, the Professor.
Whose form you claim to have captured by taking impression from the actual corpse.
There are no exceptions to the principles of two spells. This is the aid of the gravedigger. That must have been Mr. Drebber.
Surely that's illegal, isn't it? It would seem the proprietress of this repository of novelties was blinded by monetary greed.
It had nothing to do with money. The man is part of London's criminal history. That is why I had to sculpt him, to record this history. It is the raise. Oh god, how do you say that? Is it étoile? Raison d'être? Raison d'être? Help me! It is the raison d'être of the Spells Museum.
But if the man was convicted in a closed court and sent for immediate execution, then surely nobody but the members of the judiciary present would know the killer's true identity.
I assure you, behind that mask is hidden the true face of the Professor.
Do you realize what you're saying? The Professor's identity is a national secret.
I understand. And now that the truth about the special exhibit has been revealed, it must perhaps close.
Of course it will, as will your entire museum if you don't tread very carefully, madam.
That's going to be another interesting chapter in the history of my family, I think. Don't you?
So 10 years ago, on the night of the Professor's execution, you took a wax impression of his face from the corpse.
Oui, exactement.
I think that's how you said that. I know that like half the time you don't say the T's. And then like it's more than likely there's some sort of like nasally or gravelly noise in the throat if you're saying a vowel. Because it's very funny. I had friends who took French in high school and they would always talk about how like it's called the language of love. But it sounds so gross if you're not speaking it well. But that's about all I know about French.
Hold it!
You were there longer than you expected to be?
I had some difficulties in capturing the subject's form correctly. As I removed the mask, the mouth of the cadaver fell open, and I had some problems with the chin.
Dare I ask?
The man had been dead for a short while already, you see. His muscles were relaxing, and consequently, his chin would not align itself correctly.
Oh dear, what a horrible thought!
Under normal circumstances, I would have an assistant with me. However, that night, I was alone, and as a consequence, I missed my preferred window of time.
What do you mean?
When I take the impression of the visage of a cadaver, I always wait until 3 hours after death.
Why 3 hours? Is that amount of time significant?
It is because of rigor mortis.
Wrigley Mortis?
It's the name given to a phenomenon that occurs in recently deceased bodies. As a rule, 3 hours post-death, the muscles in the body begin to stiffen. But approximately 10 hours post-death, the entire body is completely rigid and inflexible. And then from that point on, the muscles slowly start to revert to their relaxed state. The effect is often used to estimate the time of death when a body is discovered.
Well, that was an education, if a slightly scary one.
As the Mademoiselle says, rigor mortis commences 3 hours after death, and it starts in the jaw.
I see, so that's why you wait.
Before that time, the mouth falls open, and it is very difficult to do my work.
It's getting hard for me to do my work with all this talk of corpses. What about that information the courts just heard from Madame Tispels? It's significant. Fuck it, let's go for it. The information about rigor mortis that you just shared with us, would you mind including it in your formal testimony? I believe it could be significant, you see.
Of course, I do not mind at all. I can't help feeling that after this latest topic, the atmosphere in the courtroom has become extremely grave. Susato! I would expect that from you.
This is no time for jokes, Mrs. Sato. Madam, kindly amend your testimony as discussed.
Bien sûr. It took me a very long time because before the onset of rigor mortis.
Hold it! Rigor mortis being the phenomenon you described, whereby the corpse becomes stiff after death. I think you said that it starts at the jaw about 3 hours post-death. Is that right?
Oh wait.
So when it has the accent there, I know it's like with se, it's like se instead of cest, like just se, right? But what the, is that just meant to be like a hard C, like a ka? Se ka? I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep complaining. Like, oh, it's so annoying when they throw in other languages into visual novels and expect you to be able to read them.
Oh wait, seka. Of course, the exact duration depends a little on the season.
I didn't realize a waxwork artisan would be so well versed in this subject.
Oh, no. That is only elementary knowledge in the field of legal medicine.
Well, I had no idea about it, but maybe I won't admit to my ignorance about forensic science.
I could ask my father to give you a very simple primer if you'd like.
I think corpses should be your domain. I'm not good with them.
Oh dear, I'll do my very best. As dawn approached, I was very worried I could be discovered.
Hold it! You said that dawn was approaching? What was the time of day then? Approximately.
Well, I could not say. But when I left the cemetery with my utensils and wax, the morning light was becoming visible.
The execution took place on the 17th of June, which had the earliest sunrise of that year. Indeed, it did. First light would have been at around 4:40 in the morning. That really is early.
The fact is, I had very little time, so I finished my work in a half hour. It was necessary to complete the impression and bury the body before daybreak, of course. If somebody had discovered me there, it would have been a catastrophe. So I had to hurry.
Is it me, or does Mr. Sholmes seem to be taking shape more quickly now, too? You certainly appear to go to extraordinary lengths for your work, madame. I wonder, is what she just said particularly significant?
Potentially. When were we told that this happened? No, we don't have a date for the resurrection. The report? At midnight, the 17th of June. Well, if he was hung and then brought to the graveyard and buried, then she immediately dug him up, right? That would be before rigor mortis. But if it took her a while, and it was about to be dawn, that says that it should have already been in rigor mortis. Right? Let's try it. Yeah, we're adding this.
Madam, those details about how long it took you to complete the sculpture and the early sunrise, could you include them in your testimony? I believe they may be significant.
Of course, if you would like me to. You're quite right, Miss Nonohodo. It is intriguing. A sunrise at 4 in the morning would be absolutely unimaginable at home, wouldn't it?
That's not quite what I meant by significant. Kindly amend your formal testimony then, madam.
With pleasure, my lord. I hurried to finish my work in the half hour before sunrise, then I left as soon as the corpse was interred.
Hold it!
Did you have reason to believe you might be discovered once the sun came up or something?
I had paid the gravedigger money to keep my little secret, of course. But with the morning light, I knew that the warden from the prison would commence his patrol of the area.
Couldn't you have just paid off the warden too then?
I had already paid the gravedigger, as I said. You cannot buy the silence of everyone, or the secret is no longer a secret, huh?
The sunrise was 4:40 a.m. that day, which means that it would have been around 4 when you began your sculpting work.
Oui, that must be correct. That would be when the gravedigger gave me the signal to come out of hiding.
So that's all I have to go on.
What's your feeling, Mr. Naruhodo?
For some reason, Dr. Scythe went along with Drebber's plan. Now, if that's really true, then the professor is the only other thing we know of that links the pair of them. So I feel sure that waxwork must be a clue to the mystery somehow.
In that case, we must use the cross-examination to uncover exactly what it means. Otherwise, the jurors are sure to revert their leanings, and the trial will be over.
I agree, but interestingly, uncovering what the professor has to do with all of this means more to Lord Van Zieks than anyone. That's the impression I'm getting anyway.
Yes, as do I.
After all, he has a profound connection to the professor as well.
So I think I figured out the timeline then. He was hung at midnight, supposedly. I don't think he was hung at all. I think that for some reason, Dr. Scythe kept him alive. And he was buried alive and started to come out of the grave. And that's when he was shot to death after that. Drebber was the gravedigger at that time. That's why he has the shovel. That's why he was there in the first place. And she was the one who had paid off Drebber. Maybe she didn't recognize it was him. Like, maybe she doesn't know what he looks like now. I'm not sure. Not that she saw his face when he stole her waxwork, so she couldn't have put together, like, that it was him, I guess. But I think she was called in after the man was shot. Which is why it wasn't already in rigor mortis. So I'm gonna present here. Oh, I have my health back! Woo! I don't have to save scum anymore! We have our health back! Alright, so I'm gonna present here. With the autopsy report.
Objection!
Nope, not that. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. I feel like that's the right piece of evidence, though. Because it says he was at midnight. Unless, is it the other statement? Let's try presenting it here.
Objection!
Okay, it was just the wrong statement.
Madame Tispels, I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows.
And is that a problem?
I believe it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another.
Quoi?
Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? According to her testimony, Madame Tispels was creating her wax impression just before dawn, and at that time, rigor mortis had not yet set in. Am I correct so far, madame?
You are? Yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaws the first time in rigor mortis, 2 to 3 hours after death. But the man's chin was limp, so he cannot have been dead for a long time.
But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Scythe's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, the 17th of June. No. If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would already have set in.
Hui! Yes, you're right. The chin would have been completely stiff.
In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection!
No coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible!
She's so pretty. I saw the long braid and it's like, wow, she's pretty.
Order! Order! Counsel, this is beyond folly. Not only do you indict the author, therefore Dr. Scythe, but you also implicate members of staff at Barclay Prison where the execution took place. By heck, extraordinary! Not in my day! My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question.
He did. Of course he did. I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was no...
Yes, the professor died that night, but what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What exactly are you suggesting did happen in that case? It's almost impossible to believe, but it would explain the link between Dr. Scythe, the professor, and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night. Counsel, present the evidence at once. The evidence that literally explains what really happened on the night of the professor's execution.
Pepe.
Take that!
What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. Executed criminal returns in the dead of night at local cemetery. You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now. Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from his grave and was killed again.
Objection!
Don't be a fool. It's simply a rumor published by the gutter press. Can you be certain of that? Are you serious? The point is, as the article says, there was a witness to what happened. My word, yes, indeed.
My wait, the young man who stole into the cemetery by chance that night?
Objection!
Of course there was a witness. The story didn't write itself, but obviously the man made it all up. And in any case, it was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding him.
Objection!
On the contrary, my lord, we all know this witness well. What? Are you suggesting, counsel, that you've identified the person in question? That you know who claims to have seen these utterly incredible events take place? Yes, my lord. In fact, you could say that he's right here before my very eyes. You will substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel. Who was the alleged witness of this staggering scene from the cemetery 10 years ago? It says it in the fucking article, guys. Can you read?
Take that!
The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drebber. Drebber. The previous witness? The special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Dispel's Museum of Waxwork recreates that decade-old scene in great detail. The condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drebber. Order? Order! Surely not, counsel. Drebber was there, in Lowgate Cemetery.
What is all this talk about, Mr. Drebber? Is the name significant?
Of course, Madame Dispels doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, Madame. To your situation as well, in fact?
What situation?
The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetrated by the very same man.
No. But that would mean...
Madame Dispels. It would appear you know the name Enoch Drebber.
Oui. Yes, I know it. But from long ago in the past.
What?
Oh my!
Good gracious! Explain yourself. Tell us everything you know.
Yes. Yes, of course. The story of the young man and the terrible sight he witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However,
In all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. The Daily Circus. It is the paper from which comes the article I've already shown the court.
You're saying that his full name was only publicized in that article? Goodness me, yes, here it is! The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drebber, a disciple of science at the University of London and a resident of its student dorms. Unbelievable!
When I read the article, I went to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in a cemetery in the dead of night would make a perfect exhibit for my House of Horrors, whether it was the truth or not.
I see, so you went to meet Mr. Drebber in order to sculpt the waxwork of the man, did you?
Exactement. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him £5 to model for the waxwork, and since that time it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of the terror from the cemetery. No, maybe he wasn't the gravedigger because she has positively identified him as someone else. But he could still have been in league with Dr. Scythe to investigate the professor's grave for her.
So 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he'd witnessed. A criminal who had been put to death, re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. But the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote that was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to use as a body double for the victim in the case we're discussing here today. Even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim and its face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? Which brings us to 3 days ago, when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asmund, but the same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated Dr. Scythe would have noticed immediately. And yet, she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court has seen earlier. Why? Because the waxwork was that of the professor. Is that what you're saying? Dr. Scythe put her name to a document confirming the death of a condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. But that misconduct was a deadly secret the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used the particular waxwork as the body double. Ugh. My lord, this court must summon Dr. Scythe to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected. But according to the missive I received this morning to the prosecutor's office, Dr. Scythe is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case?
She told us so herself, didn't she?
Lord Van Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. Lord Strongheart? The Pandora's box you're warned about is the professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me.
Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago, and surely nobody wants to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped. But Lord Van Zieks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
Objection!
The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me. Yes. Let's Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe both take the stand together. Order! Order! Very well, I will uphold your request. Bailiff, send a subpoena with immediate effect addressed to Dr. Scythe of the Forensic Investigation Team. The woman is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders.
All right then. Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could never have been committed. I'm just a stone's throw away. I can feel it. The truth behind all of this is about to come out.
Thank you for your attendance on such short notice, Dr. Scythe.
I'm disappointed in you, Lord Van Zieks. You've completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office.
Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. If it is, there's even a hint of wrongdoing, then no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt. Mr. Drebber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. And Dr. Scythe, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime.
And where's your evidence?
At present, we have no definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago.
You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes, and officially pronounced him dead.
That remains to be seen.
Is that so?
According to the newspaper reports from the time, on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life.
Don't waste my time.
And the sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drebber, wasn't it? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction, but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Scythe's. A secret so profound it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme, in fact. Mr. Drebber, tell the court, tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night in Lowgate Cemetery. So he's a student who saw it. You can see the resemblance, actually, can't you? With the man in Madame Tussauds, I mean. Surely he's not going to claim that's really what he saw, especially not after all these years. He was a research student at the University of London, was he? And a bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me.
What an interesting twist. When at the time, not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are, 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters. And in a court of law, too. Very well then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank, I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night, for what it's worth.
So, Mr. Drebber, your testimony, please, about the events of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgate Cemetery.
Yes, of course, as you wish.
The cemetery 10 years earlier.
The reason I was in Lowgate Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration of that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor. Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article.
Wait a minute. You're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now?
Of course, you'd have to have a screw loose if you believed the corpse could come back from the dead.
But, so you're saying this article is?
Not worth the paper it's printed on? I think that would describe it perfectly. Yes.
If the details in the article aren't true, it nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Scythe would have been working together.
So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument. Tell me, witness. You claim to have been in the cemetery on some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate?
That's right. Grave robbing, to be precise. As you know, Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison, so among students at the university, it had a reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts.
Grave robbing, you say?
Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead.
So you are one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society.
Actually, my fellows and I went by another name, the Repurposers.
That is quite beyond the pale. You would invite divine retribution, sir.
Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with the bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add.
I see. Out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article?
Ah, yes, that was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done, claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish. Very foolish.
Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now.
At once, my lord.
In the cemetery 10 years earlier. Spot of moonlighting. Grave robbing, you mean?
By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, do you?
Surely you'll need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that.
The lantern and spade. But who on earth would want to buy a dead body?
Any major hospital.
A hospital?
In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science. But there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with. Though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means. As aspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we made surreptitious arrangements with the hospital via some of our medical student acquaintances. We would never take anything of value from the graves. It was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we all told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand.
You realize body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences.
We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds for research.
Professor Harebrain said exactly the same.
I'm quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you revealed this abhorrent behavior. Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. But I never expected it to end the way it did. That's a regret to this day. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night.
Hold it!
A strange happening at Lowgate Cemetery, which you now deny.
Whew, sorry, had a yawn.
Not entirely.